What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Saturdays in the SEC, episode 87, final week of our 2023 SEC preview series. We're right in the middle of fall camp. A lot of scrimmages are already wrapping up. We're getting closer and closer to game week. I mean, we are actually in game week for week 0, so we will have SEC football this Saturday with Vandy hosting Hawaii. So just really excited for it to really, it's almost here now. So, but getting into our final previews of this preseason, starting off with Alabama. Obviously, the big news around Tuscaloosa and the SEC is who's going to be Alabama's starting quarterback. That's really been the talk of the offseason. And then I really don't feel like we're any different than we really been in spring or at the start of fall. I feel like we've kind of had the same pecking order and kind of the same answer going into the season that we've had all year. I think Jalen Milroe is going to be Alabama's QB1 at least to start the season. I don't think anybody's going to be able to overtake him before the game against Middle Tennessee State. He hasn't, talking about Milroe, hasn't really wrapped up the job, but I don't think anybody else has made a move to surpass him and kind of take reins of that job, even though I think all the quarterbacks have been developing coming out of the second scrimmage on Saturday. A lot of good things about Tyler Buckner. Probably had his most impressive showing so far since he's been on campus. A lot of buzz around Dylan Lonergan, the true freshman quarterback out of Georgia. He's really turned heads, but I don't think he's a factor at this time to be the starter. And then Simpson, Ty Simpson's been in the mix the entire time, but I don't think he's really been able to make a move to be the starter. And then Milroe, he's had his moments as well, as all these quarterbacks have had. They've had good moments and they've had some bad moments, but overall, it's just building the consistency within that room. But all signs are pointing to Jalen Milroe getting the first crack at it, which is not really unexpected. I mean, he's the oldest guy in the room, the guy that's obviously been at Alabama the longest. So he was the backup last year and played obviously significant snaps in the Arkansas game, and then obviously got the start against Texas A&M. So no surprise that he would get the first shot at it, and I think I would think at least he's going to start the first 2 games. I mean, because if you're starting against Middle Tennessee State, you're probably going to start against Texas also. Right. But he's going to get the first crack at it. I'm excited to see what he can do, but kind of looking at the rest of the roster, going around the offense. Receivers, area that's had some inconsistencies throughout spring and throughout fall camp. Drops have been a little bit of an issue. Kind of a revolving door there at wide receiver, kind of figuring out who those, key, 3 or 4 guys are going to be. But I think they're going to rotate 6 deep. You look at Ja'Cory Brooks, obviously a junior. Jermaine Burton's a senior, his second year at Alabama this year. And then you got some of the younger guys, Kobe Prentice, Kendrick Law, Malik Benson, excuse me. So I think all of those guys are going to get a crack at it to make an impact. So they're kind of a little bit of development going on there and seeing who can kind of be those top, contributors. And then, but the running back room is probably the deepest, most talented group on the entire team, more than likely. But for me, what I've really been looking forward to is seeing if Alabama's offensive line can go back to being what we've come to expect. And from all accounts, it seems like they are working their way towards that. They've been dominant in the run game in some of their scrimmages, really being able to run the football. The pass protection hasn't been quite as good as they are on the ground, but they've got a couple guys that are moving spots. Caden Proctor, the true freshman left tackle, it looks like he's going to start. They moved Tyler Booker from the right side to the left side at left guard to kind of help him a little bit since he's inexperienced. I think that'll help him out, give him a little bit of a cushion with an experienced guy next to him. then Seth McLaughlin at center again. Darren Dalcourt kind of moving from left to right guard, just swapping places with Booker. And then J.C. Latham kind of anchoring the offensive line at right tackle. So overall, the offensive line should be super, super strong. The running game should be great. And if Milroe is the guy for the season or extended amount of time, that the run game is going to be lethal with RPO game. We know what kind of athlete he is back there, but they got a stable of running backs that they're looking to get the ball to. And so kind of just, give me your feel of the Alabama quarterback situation, just kind of the offense as a whole kind of going into this season.
Yeah, I mean, piggybacking off what you said, the offensive line is going to be nasty. All the reports you're hearing out of camp is that they're back to the early 2000s, late or early 2010 seasons, when they had the biggest, baddest offensive lines in the league. And then you're right. I mean, everybody's, I guess, freaking out a little bit because they were more of a pro style offense with Bryce Young under center. But I mean, they're going to use the RPOs with Jalen Milroe back there. You got the run game like you talk about. I mean, you go back to 2009, 2010, 2011, 2012. Those teams were run first, and that's how they established their offense. And then they threw off of that. So they're going to be able to run the ball. Their offensive line is nasty. They, like you just said, loaded running back room. Jalen Milroe's probably the best runner in the whole SEC. I mean, the dude's got wheels, and he can take it to the house in any given play. So I don't think the running game is going to worry at all. I don't think the fans need to worry about the running game at all. Obviously, they're going to establish their offense off of that. And they're getting back to, the joyless murder balls, what they say. So that they're going to be wanting to come out there and establish that dominance, punch you in the mouth, and then make you want to quit by the end of the third quarter going into the fourth. And they're going to do that by running the football down your throat. I expect nothing less than that. Again, Nick Saban's never gone 3 years without playing in a national championship since he's been in Alabama. I don't see that being any different this year. I think they're going back to the national championship game this year. I definitely at least think they're going to win the West and go back to the SEC championship this year. So I have full confidence that Alabama is going to be back top dog of the SEC again. I don't know why anyone would ever bet against Nick Saban. Yeah, they don't have a quarterback, but hell, they didn't have a dominant quarterback back when A.J. McCarron was their quarterback, or back when Greg McElroy was their quarterback, or even when Sims was their quarterback, when Blake Sims was their quarterback. I mean, he was a running back turned quarterback. And when Jake Coker was there, these guys are not just showstoppers, all right? So they're going to be okay, especially with that offensive line and the way that they're going to run the ball. And like you said, they got Emmanuel Henderson, Malik Benson out of the transfer portal with Kendrick Law, and then they got Ja'Cory Brooks and Jermaine Burton. So they're going to be able to throw the ball. They got some veteran guys in that receiving core. They're not super, super deep there, but they've got some veteran guys, and they're going to be just fine. Their offense is not going to be a thing that fans need to worry about, in my opinion, anyhow. So I think offensively, they're going to be fine no matter who they trot out there at quarterback. But I think you're right. I think it's going to be Jalen Milroe game one, and then I think the real test, game two against Texas, is going to be Jalen Milroe just as well. I don't see why anybody is jumping the gun thinking that he can't do it, because, again, like we talked about Robbie last week, he's gotten better in the offseason. Jalen Milroe's gotten better in the offseason. He's not just the same quarterback as last year. Anybody who thinks that is absolutely nuts. This dude's been grinding. He's got some of the best coaches around him. He's going to be fine. The offense is going to be fine. But, again, don't look for the offense to be ran through the quarterback, because it's not the same quarterbacks that's been there the last 3-4 years. The offense is going to go through the running backs and the offensive line, and that's what it is going to be. That's my honest opinion, unbiased as it can get.
Yeah, I mean, I think, too, it's not totally fair to judge some of Jalen Milroe's performance last year, especially in the A&M game, because you're talking about an offense that really wasn't catered to his strengths. I mean,
exactly.
They ran the Bryce Young offense, with Jalen Milroe in there a year ago. Now they've had a whole off season. I think this offense under Tommy Rees is going to be a lot more catered to his strengths. They've had a whole off season knowing that, there's a decent chance he's going to be our starting quarterback. So, so they've had time to game plan for that. And this is a total shift in philosophy. Like you said, this is a run first offense. This is going to be very physical up front. So I think this is going to be more catered to his strengths. So I think this year it's going to be a lot easier to judge these performances because he's had a full offseason knowing like that he's probably going to be the guy or very well could be the guy, and that this offense is more catered to what he does well. Yeah, they're going to lean heavy on this run game. They're 4 or 5 deep at running back. Really cool reading about the scrimmage on Saturday that Roy Dale was actually the first running back, with ones. And a source said, I was reading On Three's report of the scrimmage and said he was running like a man possessed. So he was.
We've seen that for a long time.
Yeah, so I think all 4 of those guys are going to be really solid. But that was cool to see. I mean, I think Jace McClellan's going to be. I think he'll probably be the first back out there against Middle Tennessee State. But I wouldn't look too much into the running back kind of rotation because I think they feel very good about all 4 of the guys that they have.
You think Haynes gets some carries this year? You think he gets some like legit playing time, Justice Haynes?
I think so. He got banged up a little bit, so he didn't scrimmage on Saturday. But I do think he's going to have a pretty decent sized role. I don't think any one of the backs is going to like dominate the carries. I don't think this is going to be like a Derrick Henry, kind of steal the show. I think it's going to be really 4 guys by committee. And I think each guy's a little bit different, but they all have a lot of the same skill sets and they're all about the same size. They're all low, compact, powerful runners, even though they're each a little different in their own way. But I think they feel good about all 4 of those guys, playing winning football. But yeah, I would expect all 4 of those guys to be heavily used this year because they pretty much told you what the philosophy is going to be. And it's going to be running the football early and often. So I'm excited to see them get back to a more physical brand of football. And I think regardless of who the quarterback is, I think that will play more to their strengths, obviously, than the offense of the last 2 years. And I think, too, I was listening to Josh Payton. I thought he made a great point about Alabama's quarterback play and talking about how he thought that, whoever the guy is, he thought they were going to round into an above average play. Obviously, they're not going to be a star, but they're going to be a guy that's complementary to the style of offense that they want to play. And he said, you don't realize that a team, like obviously the last 2 years, they've known, hey, we've got Bryce Young, like he can bail us out of certain situations. But all offseason, they've gone into this knowing, hey, we don't have that guy anymore. So collectively, we've got to come together and kind of make up that difference because we're not going to have a guy to bail us out, at the end of a game or if we got to have points here. And he made the same point with Ohio State, C.J. Stroud, and some of the quarterbacks they've had in the past. So they've gone in all year knowing they're not going to have that caliber of guy, at quarterback. So that can really, mentally and that mentality, that shift in mentality all off season, that really helps going into this year knowing, hey, we don't have that guy, so we got to really come together collectively. So I think they'll be able to do that because I think they have the depth to be able to do it offensively. But kind of shifting over to the defense, your guy, Kevin Steele, you've been really high on this Alabama defense, as have I. I think he's going to bring a great level of intensity, togetherness, like getting his guys to play as a unit. This is the most talent he's ever had in his career. What he did, and Auburn had some talented defenses as well, but as the way he was able to elevate those guys' play, I think he's going to be able to do the same with this defense. But I think really I'm excited for that mentality, that aggressiveness. I think it's going to be back, that attacking, kind of Alabama defense, because really the last year or two, they haven't generated near as many turnovers as you would expect. Especially a year ago, they did not generate many turnovers on defense. I think they're looking to get back to that with an aggressive, kind of tenacious defense, and I think Kevin Steele's kind of going to bring that back to Alabama. Kind of give us your thoughts on that a little bit more, and what you're expecting from this Kevin Steele led defense this year.
Oh yeah, Kevin Steele's probably my all-time favorite coordinator in college football. Obviously, he did some great things at Auburn. This is his third stint at Alabama. He's been at LSU, been at Clemson, been at Tennessee, been at Miami. He's been at some winning programs, and everywhere he's been successful. He just has, the do your job mentality. Fly around the field. You impose your will on the other team. That is what he's all about. Attention to detail. Those guys are going to be locked in every single play. They're going to know their jobs. Rarely are they going to miss assignments. It just doesn't happen with a Kevin Steele defense. These guys are going to be fine-tuned. They're going to be smart with how they understand and play defense, but they are going to get after it. And there is no coordinator, in my opinion, that can get a group of guys ready to go and play together like you're talking about as that unit that Kevin Steele can. I mean, he's got just the roster littered with talent. He's got Dallas Turner, Jaheim Otis, Kool-Aid McKinstry, Terrion Arnold, Malachi Moore, Caleb Downs, freshman coming in. So he's got so much talent, like you said, the most talent he's ever had in his career. And he's done a lot more with a lot less. So I expect him to do a lot more with a lot more this year, because he is my favorite coach that Auburn's ever had, if I'm being real, in my lifetime. So I expect nothing but great things for this defense. There are some questions about their secondary. They don't really have a whole lot of depth behind their guys, older depth, experienced depth, I guess you would say. But their front seven, in my opinion, is going to be lights out. They're going to be able to send blitzes. They're going to be able to get pressure, and they're going to be able to sack the quarterback. I have faith in their secondary because it's like guys like Terrion Arnold and Kool-Aid McKinstry and Malachi Moore. But after that, they're really not super deep, and like I said, in experience depth. But I don't think that matters. After a few weeks, those guys are going to get some snaps, and they're going to get in the rotation a little bit. So after a few weeks, they're going to be experienced, and they're going to be just fine. But again, it's the little things, the attention to detail, and like you said, the togetherness. That's what's going to make this defense a step better than what they already are with just their talent. They get it, and Nick Saban's going to rely on Kevin Steele a little more just because he's the defense coordinator. It's what he's always done. So I expect nothing but great things for this defense. And I think they might be the best defense in the nation when it's all said and done, just because Kevin Steele. I'm super high on him.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I mean, obviously, you look at it on paper, it's pretty impressive. Defensive line, Jaheim Otis kind of anchoring that. I think he's your next big kind of defensive tackle at Alabama. They've had some great, some Marcel Darius, Jonathan Allen, Deron Payne, Quentin Williams, obviously. So I think he's that guy that can be like that next in line. And I think he's due for a big sophomore season. Just kind of got his feet wet last year, but still played a pretty big role. I think he's going to take another step forward. If you got some experienced guys, Justin Avoidby coming off an injury, he's back. He's a really, really solid player. Tim Smith is a veteran guy. They're wanting to be a little bit more consistent. When he's on, he's really, really good, but had a little bit of inconsistency, so maybe he can kind of put it all together in his senior year. But they've got some younger guys behind them, Damon Payne, James Smith, the freshman from Montgomery that they're high on as well. So, and then kind of looking at the linebacker crew, obviously, pretty good to start your linebacker crew with Dallas Turner, Chris Broswell, with Deontay Lawson. That's a pretty good group to work with. Kind of opposite Deontay Lawson, still a little competition going on there with Jahad Campbell and Tresman Marshall, the Georgia transfer. Kind of pretty close battle between them. So they're still kind of sorting that out, but they feel good about both of those guys that they can play, good football for them. And then obviously you mentioned the secondary. obviously led by Kool-Aid McKinstry. I think is going to be the first corner in the draft next year. They're really excited about Terrion Arnold and the development he's made. He started a while last year, and then Eli Ricks kind of came in and started on that side, at the back half of the season. But they felt like another year, another off season for Terrion Arnold, kind of getting a good bit of experience last year, that he's had a really great offseason and a great camp. So they're very happy with his progress. And then at the safety spots, obviously Malachi Moore has played some there. Caleb Downs, he's kind of locked down a starter spot, but they're still kind of figuring out rotating some of those, in their dime packages, what their star position is going to be. Is it going to be Earl Little? Malachi Moore can play there. Obviously, I mentioned Caleb Downs, but Devontae Smith. They actually have another Devontae Smith, but he plays defense now. He's a safety. So I can only hope if he's half as good as the other Devontae Smith, he's going to be a really good player. So, but they're excited about him as well. He may actually start at safety. So there's some young guys there, but they're really excited about the progress. And they did add a couple guys from the transfer portal that are going to contribute. Jalen Key from UAB, and then Trey Amos. They're kind of figuring out how all those pieces are going to fit together. So that's kind of a lot of shuffling going on in practice and scrimmages to seeing like how the pieces are going to fit the best. Because obviously they play nickel a lot with 5 defensive backs. They play dime a lot with 6 defensive backs, especially against, some of the more pass-happy teams, like a Tennessee, obviously, and some of the, like a team like an Ohio State, a lot of the pass-first kind of teams in the league, in the country. So it's important to see how all those pieces are going to fit together. A lot of competition and reps going on in the secondary, but overall they feel very strong about it, how those guys are developing, and then those transfers are able to add a little bit of depth as well, even if they're not starting or maybe playing a significant amount of snaps. They're going to add some depth at those positions. But overall, yeah, I think you're right. It should be one of the top defenses in the country. Really excited about Kevin Steele leading it. I think, like you said, it's going to be one of the better defenses in the country. If it's not, there's something wrong, because there's no reason statistically this shouldn't be one of the best defenses in the country. And they've got a run game to really complement them this year, maybe more so than the last few. So I think that should only help as well. But overall, really excited to see how it plays out and what they have once the season starts. Going to go ahead and pull up their schedule here. Obviously, I feel like it works in their favor pretty well, because you got some key matchups at home. I mean, obviously Texas in week 2. I cannot wait for that Texas receiving core with Sark, at the controls to go against the Alabama secondary. I think that should be an incredible matchup. There's so many pros just in those 2 units alone, much less the rest of both of those teams. So, and then you've got obviously Tennessee, kind of a revenge game at home, and LSU at home. So a pretty, favorable home schedule. Obviously, 3 of your bigger games are in Bryant-Denny Stadium. So just kind of give me your thoughts on this schedule and kind of what you're expected this year for Alabama.
I think the toughest stretch comes in October. Obviously, you got A&M, Arkansas, Tennessee, and then you come off the first week of November, and it's LSU. But if I'm being real, I think Alabama goes 11-1, 12-0. Again, I've said on this podcast 1,000 times, Nick Saban has only gone undefeated at Alabama 3 times, I believe. I could be wrong with that. Might only be 2. I know in 2020 and in 2009. Is there another one?
That's it. No, that's it.
Exactly. And how many championships has he won since he's been there?
He's won
6 in him, hoes. So he's won 6 and only gone undefeated twice. So Bama fans, don't bite my head off for me thinking he's going to go 11-1. But I think that he loses. I know he has a bye week after the Tennessee game going into LSU, I think one of the games he's going to lose is either between Tennessee or LSU. I know he lost to those last year, but those are two tough teams to go back to back against. Again, I know there's a bye week in between there, but if Bama doesn't go undefeated, I think they only lose one game, and I think it's either to Tennessee or to LSU, and that is my God's honest opinion. I think the A&M game could be tough because it is at A&M, and we're high on A&M this year, thinking that the number one recruiting class of college football history is all sophomores this year. They all played a bunch, so they're going to be, more experienced, and they're going to play a lot better. The talent or the product is going to be a lot better. Jimbo is not going to outcoach Nick Saban. He hasn't. I don't think it's going to happen, and so I think it's either going to be Tennessee or LSU if they lose one this year, and if they don't, they're going to be undefeated going to the SEC championship game to probably face an undefeated Georgia in the SEC championship game for a battle of the ages. And both those teams are going to get to the playoffs if that's the case. So you're going to get a repeat against them for the second time in however many 4 years, 3 years, whatever it is. But that's my honest opinion. I couldn't tell you which one it is, but I think those are the two toss-up games. All the other ones you can pencil in a W right beside it. I think Texas is going to be a little tougher, but it's not at Texas this year, and that's a completely different ball game.
Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, I honestly think they're going to go 11-1 too. I'm like you. I think they win the West, but it is. I mean, it's obviously several of the tough games are at home, but it's still a fairly tough schedule. I think the back half, obviously you mentioned at A&M, Arkansas. Now, obviously, the two big ones, Tennessee and LSU. And then, I mean, you don't know what either of these teams are going to be, but that's not two easy trips to Lexington or Auburn either. I mean, you never know in the Iron Bowl. Nobody would have predicted 2 years ago. I mean, Auburn should have won the 2021 Iron Bowl. It was a literal miracle Alabama.
We started TJ Finley, who can't even win the job at Texas State, and took him to overtime. That should never have happened. Auburn should have never done that. And then you're right. So the Iron Bowl it's the Iron Bowl, and it's that way for a reason. Anything can happen. So no. I mean, you're 100% right.
I mean, especially if it becomes even more dangerous if they are exceeding expectations. It's like a wave.
Very true.
Because nobody rides a wave like Auburn rides a wave. I'm like honestly, like the momentum just is incredible how it builds and builds and builds and builds. So I mean, you just don't know what they're going to be yet. I mean, especially if they're exceeding expectations, that becomes more and more dangerous. So I mean, obviously, you never know. Kentucky, we don't know what they're going to be, but I'm pretty high on Kentucky overall. I think they're going to be a pretty solid team. So, I mean, that's not.
And everybody gives Alabama their A game. Everybody gives Alabama their number one because they want to beat the best. Everybody gives them their A game.
And so, obviously, this year not having the quarterback playing away, if they're able to slow your run game down a little bit, you never know, and able to put pressure on Jalen Milroe or whoever the quarterback is, and maybe your pass game's not in sync. If a team can kind of make you one-dimensional, you never know. That makes you more susceptible to an upset or, get beat, either at home or on the road. So, I mean, I'm not overlooking those two road trips in November by any stretch because you just don't know exactly what those teams are going to be. So, I mean, I look up and down the schedule. I mean, there's tough games, throughout. So obviously, you mentioned the Texas game early. Should be an incredible game. I mean, we know what Sark can do, and they've got weapons. And when you have a quarterback and when you got weapons, you got a chance. And their defense should be improved. So I'm like you, though. I think it's probably too much to ask for them to come in Bryant-Denny and pull off an upset, but should be a really competitive game, and they do have the pieces and the talent that could pull it off. So
I just got to ask, why the hell are they going to South Florida?
That's a good question. I think they did like a 2-1 with South Florida. I think so. They're doing like a home away home. I think.
Okay.
If I'm not mistaken, I've got to double check that. So yeah, that's kind of a weird little road trip in there. Not normally you go to a group of 5 teams.
They're not going to be able to hold the Bama fans in that stadium.
Yeah, so I know Florida did it like a year or two ago. They went to South Florida, but yeah, it is kind of weird. They'll be making a return trip next year. I think it's a 2-1, or it could just be a straight home and home. I don't know, but yeah, South Florida, they don't get to host too many games like this, so
Yeah.
um, it should be. I mean, it should be a good environment for them. Obviously, they're going. I mean, if you're not going to show up to this game, you're not going to show up to many probably.
You're
So,
right.
um, then obviously Lane, he always has a good game plan. Offensively they've got some good weapons. So, interested to see what Pete Golden brings in on the defensive side. But
I just
um,
don't think the student beats the master this year. I don't think it happens.
I don't either. The one that does probably worry me outside of the Tennessee or LSU, and I know I referred to the two road trips in November, but the A&M one does. They played Alabama really tough the last 2 years. I mean, they beat them in 21, obviously. So um, that one does worry me because I think A&M's better position now with this recruiting class, another year older, and Connor Weidman's a legit quarterback. They don't have those same kind of questions now. Um, and he hasn't used his game of the life card yet that some quarterbacks have against Alabama. Stephen Garcia
Right.
used it. Uh, what's who's the guy that was at Auburn too? That was A&M's quarterback 2 years ago. His name is slipping my mind.
Calzada.
Calzada, yeah, he played his game of his life card. Now he's dropped off the face of the earth. We don't know where he's at now. But he played obviously the game of his
I think
lifetime.
he's at Incarnate Ward, maybe. Maybe I'm wrong on that, but he's somewhere smaller school.
Yeah, so I mean, you never know. I don't think Connor Weidman's used his yet, so you never know. I'm sure Peyton Thorne will be pulling his out November 25th, but
I hope
uh,
so.
but anyways, that's kind of a little running joke I have. Some of these random quarterbacks kind of just go off against you. I mean, Hugh Freeze has had it happen. Bo Wallace, baby. I mean, Bo
And
Wallace.
Chad Kelly.
Chad Kelly. So I mean, he's had a couple, so you never know. But overall, I mean, it is a fairly tough schedule. But like I said, it does help that some of those key matchups are at home. Um, Obviously, all roads are kind of leading to a showdown with LSU on November 4th. Super excited for that one. But yeah, a lot of good matchups on here, though. And as we found out, doing a deep dive in these previews, that there's no easy games in the SEC. I mean, we're going to cover Missouri here in a minute. And I tell you what, their defense looks pretty good. And offensively,
They return a lot of players.
Yeah, so there is no easy outs in this conference whatsoever. It's only going to get tougher in 2024. I think the times of people going undefeated, especially in this conference, is almost going to be extinct because, man, it is going to be a absolute grind going forward. So I don't think there's going to be a ton of undefeateds, as we go into the future. So,
no, 100% not.
And you can hardly expect it now, to be honest with you. Maybe one or two teams have the capability of doing it, but even then, it's extremely challenging. So I think 11-1 is probably the most likely scenario here. So
I agree 100%. I do want to touch on something that Nick Saban said when he was asked about his quarterbacks, and he said they asked what he saw with his quarterbacks. He said, "Well, I saw some of them complete some passes. I saw some of them make some good reads. I saw them all make bad reads. I saw them all do some pretty good things, do some incompletions, do some completions. I don't know what you want me to say. That's what I saw. Hilarious, absolutely hilarious."
Yeah, what we've come to know from Nick Saban, he's not going to tip his hand
He's keeping it
on
close
who
to
the
the vest.
quarterback is. He's never announced a starting quarterback. I mean, even when you know who the starting quarterback is, it's still never announced.
Nope.
I mean, and obviously, like last year, they're not going to announce Bryce Young as the starter, like you already know he's the starter. But they've never announced a starting quarterback, and a lot of times too, your team in most cases already know who it is or has a good idea of who it's going to be. So there's a lot of times there's not really a purpose to announcing it to the media or announcing it to the world. Like some coaches do, and that's fine. Like I don't think there's a right or wrong way to do it, but um, there's not really a ton of benefit necessarily to announcing it to
He
everybody.
announces it to his team and his quarterbacks, and that's really all that matters.
Yeah, and then you'll find out, week one who jogs out there first.
Yep.
But like I said, it's going to be Jalen Milroe. I mean, there's really no doubt about it at this point, unless something crazy happens in the next 12 days. But I don't see that happening. He's going to get the first crack, and I think he's going to keep it as long as he's playing good football. And somebody comes and takes it when they get their opportunity. But it's going to be his show for the foreseeable future. It sure looks like.
I agree. I see nothing worse than 11-1, unless they just lay a couple of eggs and don't have. They're playing their C- game. I don't see it happening.
But yeah, I'm with you. I think 11-1 is probably most likely. And then potentially a showdown with Georgia could be epic. But we'll see what happens. It's gonna be interesting to see. Kind of shifting over now to Missouri, our final team of these previews.
By quick.
What's that? Yeah,
it really went by quick.
It really did. You're right, man. It's amazing how fast 7 weeks goes. But as we mentioned before, I've thoroughly enjoyed doing this. And I tell you what, I'm even more impressed with this Missouri team after kind of doing a deep dive on them. I didn't realize they were better defensively than I thought they were a year ago, even. And then looking what they return on that side of the football, I mean, this should honestly be like sneaky one of the better defenses in the league, I think.
They returned 7 guys, I think.
Yeah, and their secondary, their secondary really returns
everybody damn near.
These are some guys that were high level talents coming out of high school. Ennis Rakestraw was a guy that was coveted by a ton of teams. He's going into his junior season. He's now a year removed from an ACL tear, so I think he's due for a big season. Chris Abrams-Drain, who's been there a while. Joseph Charleston, the Clemson transfer. Jalen Carlisle. So they returned quite a few guys and experience in this secondary. And then they're kind of led up front by Darius Robinson. It's been in the interior, going to move more outside this year. He's an all SEC kind of player. And then Tyron Hopper kind of leading that linebacking core. So at each level of this defense, they've got leadership, they've got some talent. And then I think they're looking to improve. They were, I think, the 50s in scoring defense last year. They were even better in total defense at 33rd. And they were pretty solid against the run as well. So I'm expecting some pretty good things out of Missouri defense this year.
Well, you got to think, last year they should have beat Auburn. They had a 10-point lead on Georgia in the fourth quarter. Mm-hmm. And then I believe they let one other slip away to Florida. They lost to Florida, and they should not have lost to Florida. But if the running back doesn't fumble in the end zone, diving into the end zone against Auburn, they beat Auburn. If their defense can just saddle up for one more drive against Georgia, they beat Georgia. So this team last year, where did they go? They went 5-7 last year, or 6-7 last year, including the bowl game. So 6-6 in the regular season. So they went 500. They should have been 8-5 last year. I mean, they very well could have been 8-5. There's no reason that they should have lost to Florida last year, in my opinion. So I expect this defense to really turn it around, like you said. I mean, in 2021, they were 105th total defense, and they turned it around to 33rd last year. They were 124th rushing defense, turned that around to 31st rushing defense last year, and they were 113th in the scoring defense and turned that around to 55th in the scoring defense last year. Their passing defense kind of got a little worse. In 2021, they were 29th, and last year they were 47th. But they were still a top 50 in every category except for scoring, and they were a top 55 defense. So their defense really, really turned it around last year, but their offense really hurt them. I mean, they got worse in every offensive category than they were in 2021. So it's like their team just flip flopped. It kind of feels like a Ellis Johnson type defense when it was just a bend but don't break, but they broke a lot. On their offense. So it's just Brady Cook is supposedly the guy, but he said that it's going to be an open competition going into the season. So I'm expecting Brady Cook to take the job away and end up being their guy throughout the year. I mean, he played for him every game last year, so I expect him to be the guy. He did have some shoulder surgery in the offseason this year, but I think that this team maybe is the team that Drinkwitz gets his first winning season with Missouri in, and Missouri can do it. I mean, they were SEC championship game away from making it to the national championship against Auburn in 2013, and they won a Big 12 championship game away from making it to the playoffs or making it to the championship game in like 2013 or 12 or 11 or something like that. So they've been to 2 SEC championship games, but Eli Drinkwitz has not gone better than 500 since he's been there. I don't think he's recruited well enough to do that. I think that the guys he has as starters are really, really good, but I don't know how good the depth is. And that's obviously, we talked about that a bunch. That's going to come in big time in the back end of the season. I mean, just look at this. They got Kentucky, South Carolina, Georgia, and Tennessee all in a row, and then Florida and Arkansas. But that, Lord, I didn't even see above them. LSU, Kentucky, South Carolina, Georgia, and Tennessee. That is a stretch right there. I just think that their schedule does not benefit them in any way. I mean, they got Kansas State as one of their out-of-conference games, and Kansas State blew them out of the water last year. I mean, they were the Big 12 champion. So you got Kansas State, who was the Big 12 champion. You got Georgia, who was the SEC and national champion. You got Tennessee, who was damn good last year. And you got LSU, who played for the SEC championship game last year. So you got 4 teams who were competing for the championship or won the championship in their conference or in the whole league on their schedule this year. That is a tough pill to swallow as a Missouri fan and as a Missouri coach or player when you're looking at your schedule. Like, damn, these are some tough games that we're going to have to go. And it's not just 1 or 2, it's 4 of them guys that were potentially winning the conference or winning the national championship or playing for the conference championship. So their plate is full this year, and that is my only thing of why they may not get over that 500 mark. I think they still might go 6-6 this year. Yes, they have a lot of talent. They got a lot of guys returning. They got a lot of older guys, leadership, but I just don't think that their talent and their ability is better than all these other teams that they're going to play, because their rosters, Georgia, Tennessee, Kentucky, LSU, Kansas State, their rosters are so much deeper than what Missouri has. I don't know that they can match up with them for the long haul. Maybe for the first 5-6 weeks, they can squeak some out. They might be able to beat Kansas State, but man, once October hits, they have a rude awakening, and it don't let up at all.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, like we talked about too, defensively, they look really strong. You made a good point offensively. I just don't know if their offense can be good enough to really assist their defense. You know, we kind of talked about that with Auburn as well. Like, Auburn's defense would hang in for a bit, but when your offense just stalls and stalls and stalls, it eventually catches up to you.
Yep.
And I feel like that could happen to this Missouri team, and I think it did last year. It could happen again this year. Obviously, they need better quarterback play. I do think Brady Cook will probably win the job as well. Jake Garcia, the transfer from Miami, former Netflix star from Titletown High, he's the main competition there. So I think Brady Cook will probably win the job. Good news is he's got some pretty good weapons to throw to. Luther Burden, 5-star wide receiver in the 2022 class. He's back as a sophomore. Probably the most talented guy on the entire team. Mookie Cooper has been pretty productive for them. And then Theo Weiss from Oklahoma has been a pretty good player as well. So He's got, three pretty good weapons to throw to. The only bad part about it is their offensive line is not very good.
Yeah.
Wasn't very good last year. I don't know how much better it's going to be. They return a couple starters, but I just don't know how much improved it's going to be there. I don't think it's going to be improved enough to really make the jump offensively they're looking for. So I just don't know if their offense can complement their defense enough. And like you said, a lot of it is their schedule's just so tough.
I mean, they're out of conference is the first 4 weeks, and the next 8 weeks is all conference games. Whoever designed their schedule just gave them the middle finger because you front loaded the heck out of this schedule, and then you go 8 in a row for SEC games. I mean, at least the other teams are sprinkling in and out of conference the last 3 weeks of the season. Missouri said, no, thank you. Give them to me all at once. Ridiculous.
Yeah, so it's I bet they're wishing they could flip Middle Tennessee State to like November.
And actually, the Memphis game's actually it's a neutral site game. It's in St. Louis, so it's closer to Missouri, but still, I can't believe that their first 4 games are out of conference and then everything else is in conference. Crazy.
Yeah, it's a tough schedule. I think it's still 6th ranked schedule in the country, so it's definitely one of the tougher ones. As you mentioned, that the key, out of conference game against Kansas State, they obviously got the better Missouri a year ago, so they're looking to return the favor. I mean, that's the reigning Big 12 champion. So kind of a top 10 caliber team from a year ago. So that's going to be a huge one. That's a sneaky good game there in week 3. I mean, that's 11 o'clock kick too. So I'm looking forward to that one to see if they can kind of get a key non-conference win. Obviously, that'd be a huge boost for them because that would put them 3-0. More than likely. So. And then, like you said, having 8 straight SEC games to end the year is brutal. As you mentioned, the October stretch with LSU, Kentucky, South Carolina, Georgia, Tennessee. Good Lord, that's fairly close to Arkansas's 4-game stretch.
Yeah,
like that. Although this is a 5-game stretch, there is a bye week in there, but that's 5 really tough ones in a row. So I do think they are improved overall, but I just don't think it's enough to jump, to the middle of the pack in the East. I think they're probably a 6th place team in the East, maybe 5th. I think 5th is probably the ceiling. I think, but I've probably got them about 6th. I guess maybe depending on how that Florida game goes, if they're able to beat Florida, I could see them probably 5th. But
I think Florida's last. I think they're last in the East, and I think Missouri's 6th or 5th for sure.
You think Vandy's over Florida? You think Vandy's ahead of Florida in the East?
I think so, dude. Florida is going to be boo-boo this year, bro. They're not going to be good. They've had some injuries in camp and in the summer. Florida is not going to be good this year. I'm telling you, I think Vandy's going to be better than Florida. I think it's Florida, Vandy.
That's a pretty bold take, too. I mean,
I believe
it. So that's your first bold take of the 2023 season? That definitely
is Florida is going to be worse than Vandy this year, yes.
Okay, I like it. I mean, hey, that's pretty strong, though. So I like it. First bold take of 2023, Vandy's better than Florida. So
already hammered Florida under 5.5 wins this year, and that's just free money. They're giving it to me. So, yeah. I mean, I think they're going to win 4 games. I hammered it under 5.5 because if I'm off, they still only win 5. They're not winning 6. It's not happening. I took this a month and a half ago when I went to the casino, hammered it $100 on Florida under 5.5. Bring me my money.
So little early preview for next week. You're not picking Florida with a road upset at Utah on a Thursday night.
Absolutely not. I don't care if Cam Rising's in a wheelchair and not playing. They aren't beating Utah.
I'm with you there. I'm looking forward to to previewing week 1 games. We got a pretty good week 1 slate. Looking forward to the game Saturday for Vandy. I've said it last week. I think they're going to absolutely drum Hawaii. Hawaii's absolutely pitiful. So I'm expecting Vandy to get off to a hot start. So
absolutely,
they need to, because it gets brutal once SEC play arrives. But yeah, I'm with you. I'm with you on Missouri. I think solid team. They're like a lot of the middle tier teams in the SEC. They have several strengths on the roster, but I just don't think enough overall talent and depth to be able to, propel themselves maybe above expectations. I do think they are a team, like I've said about, 4 or 5 other SEC teams. I think on any given Saturday, they showed it last year against Georgia, almost pulling off an upset. I think in one specific game, they're good enough to beat you. But like you said, over a 5, 6, 7 week stretch, I just don't think they have enough to get a ton of wins in that kind of stretch. But 100%. On a one game scenario, they are good enough to beat a lot of the teams in the SEC. But you're judged on a 12-game schedule, not 1 or 2. So I just don't think they have enough, depth and talent overall to beat expectations. So I'm expecting another 5 to 6 wins probably. I think they could get bowl eligible for sure, but I'm not expecting a ton more than that, really.
No, I think they're 500 again at ceiling, and I think 5 and 7 at worst. I think it's going to be around there. But yeah, they're a lot like Auburn, a lot like Mississippi State, a lot like Arkansas. I just think they're middle of the pack, and they're going to take their lumps, and they're going to give some lumps. This ain't the team that's going to be it this year. They're not going to be the sleeper team that's going to come out and shock the world. They're not them. I'm taking Mississippi State over to be a sleeper team over Missouri 10 times out of 10. I'm taking Auburn to be a sleeper team over Missouri 10 times out of 10. I just don't think they've recruited well enough. I don't think they have good enough depth. And I'm not a huge Drinkwitz believer. I like Drinkwitz. I like him a lot. I'm just not a big believer in Drinkwitz.
I'm not a Drinkwitz believer either. I think he's okay. But I'm not like,
he's not the guy to save your program. He's just not.
Well, I mean, he is a Gus Malzahn protege after all. So
yeah.
I mean, even though Gus, has done a solid job at UCF as well. I mean, I think Gus
he's the only coach to beat Saban 3 times.
Yeah, so Gus is an okay coach. I don't think he's bad by any means. Obviously he's good enough to make a pretty good living at it. Auburn gave him a good bit of money and gave him a good bit to go away as well. So
yeah, you know why Auburn gave him a good bit of money? Because he beat Alabama 3 times. And my question is, if you can beat Alabama, why the hell can't you win all the other games and get us into the postseason? Quit giving this guy a freaking extension because he beats one team. If he can beat that one team, he's a good enough coach to get you to the end. So don't extend him if he's not consistently getting you to the end. He did it 1 year, not even his players. God mighty. Used to drive me nuts. Don't extend him because he's beaten one team. Extend him because he's going to the postseason. And he wasn't doing that. So I wanted to get his ass out of town. I'm glad we did.
Man, he could not have timed up a better victory than winning that 2017 Iron Bowl. Obviously, he won the 2013 Iron Bowl. That obviously made it to the championship, obviously. And then 2017, like things, that was kind of perfect. And that kind of landed him that next extension at a perfect time for him. And then he kind of rode that to the end, really. Obviously, he ended up winning in 2019 also. But that, like you said, those kind of flowed him. And to be honest, those couple victories made him $49 million.
Yeah, it did. And I'm like, why are we paying this man $49 million for being mediocre? Why are fans happy with beating Alabama and being mediocre? Why? Why can't we go get a coach who can beat Alabama, but also beat all the other teams? Because, yeah, I love beating Alabama, but I hate beating Alabama when we lose to 5 other teams. There's no reason. If you lose to 5 other teams, you should damn sure lose to Alabama. And if you're not losing to Alabama, then why the hell are we losing to these 5 other teams? That's what always drove me nuts, dude. I'm like, go get a coach who can beat Alabama and beat everybody else. And I think we finally found that. Again, it's going to take a while, but it used to just drive me nuts that people used to love it. I loved when we won the Iron Bowl. Was never upset about it. But I was upset when the next day they gave him a 3-year more extension. So we're just going to be mediocre for 3 more years. Oh, obviously still get worked up about it.
To be honest, I feel like the 8-5 comment was kind of the nail in the coffin a little bit, even though it was kind of trending that way anyway.
It's a good year. No, the hell it ain't.
It may be some places, but it's not at Auburn. It's not at teams that are top tier in the SEC. 8-5 get you run out on the rails.
Quick, but not quick enough.
But
I can guarantee you that will never come out of Hugh Freeze's mouth. If we go 8-5, they'll say we had a decent year, but it's not what we wanted. It's subpar. And that's what you should say, because if you're okay with going 8-5, you're a mediocre head coach. You have a mediocre mindset, and your team will always be mediocre. Facts.
But yeah, it's going to be exciting to see. You know, obviously, I think specifically talking about Auburn, I think I like them exceeding expectations. You said you'd be tickled with 8-5. Now, 4 years from now, you're not going to be tickled with 8-5.
Absolutely not.
But this year, it's okay if it's a starting point.
Mm-hmm.
But when you're
circumstances definitely make the it's the context of it.
Yeah. Now, when you're in year 7 and you're 8-5, that's not a good season. But anyways, been a fun conversation. Been a lot of fun doing these previews. We're finally at the end of them. Felt like they 7 weeks takes a while, but in the same breath, it really didn't take that long. But we really enjoyed doing them again. We plan on doing them next year and into the future. We actually got to start them a little bit earlier next year because we got 2 more teams to cover. So it'll be 8 weeks instead of 7. So we'll probably start them a little earlier. We'll be back next week to preview week 1. We're finally about to preview week 1. We're tickled to death about that. We'll recap week 0 after Vandy beats Hawaii by about 40.
Yeah, whatever the spread is, hammer Vandy. Whatever it is, I don't care if it's 30. Hammer Vandy.
Yeah, and I'm taking A.J. Swan for about 4 to 5 tutties.
Mm-hmm. I like it.
I like A.J. Swan. I like Will Shepherd. I think they are absolutely going to shred the Hawaii Rainbow Warriors secondary all over the city of Nashville. So, going to be fun. We got SEC football Saturday. We're back next week, preview week 1. And then it's full steam ahead after that. So,
absolutely.
Can't wait. Be sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel. We really appreciate it. And we'll see you guys back next week.
Thank you, guys.